Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Cars and Coffee at our new time, 10 a.m. Eastern. And if you're a car guy that wants to learn more about cars and performance, you're in the right spot. We're going to spend the next hour talking about, on today's topics, we're going to talk about improving the front grip so you can turn on a dime. We were going to talk about the cold air kit for the 550 Mustangs, but I got such great questions this week. I'm going to postpone that till next week. And then, of course, we typically do quick hitters, which are like quick questions I can answer, except the questions are so good this week, I'm going to spend a lot of time on them. So this is Kenny Brown, and this is my Cars and Coffee, where I try to share with you some of my 40 years of professional motorsports and building some pretty cool street cars, track cars, and championship-winning race cars. This week's artwork from my collection is Dan Gurney at the Belgian Grand Prix 1967, which is the only American driver in an American car to ever win a Formula One race. And he had the Westlake V12, so it was actually a pretty cool car. But it's part of American history. I should have had it up a couple of weeks ago because the Formula One was at Spa, which is in Belgium, one of my all-time favorite tracks. If there's one track I would want to drive on my bucket list, it would be Spa. So, Carrie left me these notes. Carrie's not here today, but of course she left me my notes, as everybody knows. Let's see. Thank you for joining us. If you're on YouTube, you haven't subscribed yet, please hit the big red button. She's not here to tell me that this week, so I have to kind of do it on my own. If you want to subscribe, hit the big red button, and to get notifications for when we're going to go live, there's a little bell. Click on the little bell. Our Facebook fans, we love you. You've been with us a long time. Be sure to check the like button, click the like button. That helps spread the word. And if you're not a member of the Speed Therapy Society, I strongly recommend it. It is a private Facebook group, and it's all like-minded car guys and gals. And the camaraderie and what's shared in there as far as pictures and comments is just pretty incredible. So if you're not a member, please join. And that's where all the questions come from. Any of the questions that I answer in Cars and Coffee all come out of the Speed Therapy Society. So then, of course, if you like what we're doing here, please share it with your friends. We like this. We need to spread the word. I mean, it's always good. It helps in Facebook land. So with that, I think I'm going to kind of move into, got to go make sure I read everything. Carrie's not here to yell at me, so I got to be really careful. I do everything on my own. Oh, also, if you got questions, you can send them in through the comments, because if I have time at the end, I'll try to answer some of your questions. So you can send in questions live. So let's kind of move down to the first of our questions is from Greg Simmons. And his question is, what are the jacking rails for? Okay, that's a great question. And let me take you back in a little history. 1986, I was building, managing, engineering the Celine R Mustangs in the SCCA Pro Endurance Championship. And in endurance racing, you got to do a lot of pit stops, a lot of tire changes. You can just imagine how many times you have to jack a car up in a 24-hour race, even a 12-hour race. And it's, to have to crawl under every time and look under the car that's lowered to find a spot to jack it up, just waste time. So what we did is we put a 1x1 steel tube, or square tube down right by the pinch weld so that we could jack the car up really quickly. Well, the SCCA saw that, and they thought because it wasn't part of the roll cage that it was an extra chassis stiffening device, which come on, really? So we had to do it. We had to put it at the third, 1/3 and 2/3. We had to take a hacksaw and hack a little bitty groove into them so it wouldn't be considered a full tube. I don't know why. In 87, they were on there and didn't bother us. So anyway, that's where the jacking rails for Mustang started, was in the 86 Celine endurance cars. And then about maybe 88, 89, we were doing a lot of Mustangs. And I would put jacking rails in all the cars we did. I said, well, why don't we bring this to market? So that's when we took the jacking rails to market. And it is an amazing help. If you got a lowered car, you know what it's like to kind of crawl under and find the right spot to stick the jack. and sometimes you miss. Well, with the jacking rail, it's right along the pinch weld. You can put the jack anywhere along the pinch weld. Plus, after it's jacked up, you can put your jack stands right there on the jacking rails, which opens up completely underneath the car. And a little trick that we do is once you have a jacking rail on and you put the jack in for the first time and you jack it up and you jack it up and just touch the jacking rail, what we do is we put a little piece of tape or a mark right on the jack at the outer edge of the car. So all we have to do, don't even have to look under the car, just roll it into that mark, jack it up, car goes up in the air. There's, Wes, who does some of our installation videos, had very good comments to make on that. If you haven't seen the video on the rear grip kit installation, that's a good place to show you, how well they work. We've got jacking rails for the Fox cars, which they started, the SN95 and the 197s. 550s are coming soon. Now, it's interesting, the jacking rails that we came up with for the Fox also fit the SN95. They also fit Gen 1 Mustangs. So that's our straight too. But for the SN95s, it was a little trickier because the pinch welds. So what we did is we went to inch by inch and a half, and we have these holes in there that match up to the little pin marks on the pinch weld. So they can just weld right up there, jack the car up, and away you go. All of our undercar chassis pieces, like jacking rails, subframe connectors, matrix brace, they're all zinc plated to resist rust. At least, we spend a little more money getting good plating on them so they don't rust. I don't like powder coating things that go underneath the car because sooner or later that chips. And if you got to weld something, it's powder coated, the fumes are noxious. So everything we do under the car for chassis is zinc plated. Okay, so jacking rails, you need them. If you don't have them and you have a lowered car, they're well worth the investment. I mean, it's just so much easier to jack the car up. So that's what jacking rails are for. Exactly what they say, jacking the car up. And they work really well. Okay, now here's a good one. Bray Earls, do you sell brake pad capable for street and autocross for the S550s? Well, the answer is yes. We sell a lot of brake pads. And the reason we sell a lot of brake pads is because we have different compounds for different applications and different heat ranges. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that you need to match your brake pad compound to the temperature that your rotors, maximum temperature of your rotors. Now on Ruby, my 2012 track car, I'll typically see 1200 degrees rotor temperature in the front. And so I have a brake pad that 1200 degrees it's between, brake pads are between 400 and 1600 degrees, so 1200 is right in the middle, so it's perfect. What we've found out is that, if you put like that kind of brake pad in for like street and autocross, it's not going to work. It's not going to see enough temperature for the compounds to work. It's going to make noise and make dust. So getting the compound right is really important. And that's we have people call in and talk to me, and I'll recommend a compound. From this manufacturer alone, we have 8 different compounds to choose from at heat ranges from 800 degrees all the way up to 2100 degrees. So I'll pick the pad. But getting back to your question, yes, we have a brake pad. We actually have 2. The first one is a street pad, and it will take temperature up to 800 degrees. Now, I don't have any real data on this, but I'm guessing that most factory street pads are good to maybe 400 or 500 degrees tops. If you do repeated stops, like if you take like OE brake pads out to the track, you're going to burn them up like within a couple laps because they just can't take the heat. So I'm just guessing that they're in that 400 or 500 temperature range. So the first one we have is a street pad that has has really good initial bite, and it's good up to 800 degrees. And that's from like 0 up to 800. So whatever the temperature is, it just bites right away. You don't have to wait to get heat into the pads. The second one is a little more aggressive, and that one goes up to 1000 degrees. Now, the one that goes up to 1000 degrees is more of I'd say the first one is a street autocross pad. The second would be an autocross street pad, if that makes sense to you. And it's got great friction coefficients. It comes on from dead stop all the way up to 1,000 degrees, like I said. Has good modulation characteristics, but it's going to be a little noisier, maybe. It depends, and maybe a little more dust than the GS1 pad. That's the street pad, but that's a great pad as well. So we got 2 pad options. If you want to call the office on Monday and set up a 15-minute consult with me, I can talk through, and we can kind of figure out what's going to be the best pad for you. So the answer is yes. And for the guys that go to the track, we've got, like I say, I've got a great selection of pads. Also, a real bonus is we get our track pads pre-bedded. Anybody that's had racing pads know you have to go out and bed your pads. And if you don't do a good job of bedding your pads, then they aren't going to last as long. And what I mean by bedding is for like say on my car, I've got pads that go between 400 and 1,600 degrees is their operating range. To bed them and get all the gases out and all the volatiles from manufacturing, they need to get up to operating temperature. So to do that, I'll go and that's 70, 80 miles an hour. I'll do a power stop down to about 20 and speed up and then do that a couple, 3 times. And at some point, I'm gonna start getting harder and harder on the brakes. At some point, all of a sudden, the brake pedal gets really hard and the car won't stop. Bingo. That means the pads are bedded. At that point, I drive back to the pits, and the pads have to cool completely after being bedded. And once you get back out, then boom, you got magical brakes. Now the advantage of that typically takes a whole session to bed a set of pads. So by getting our pads pre-bedded, you don't have to do that. You just don't have to waste a whole session bedding your brake pads. You just put them on and go. And like I say, we got lots of different compounds. And we set up a 15-minute consult with Carrie on Monday, and we'll talk through compounds and see what's going to be the best for you. So, next question. Oh, also, if you have brake pads, you need high temperature brake fluid, period. You don't want to, if you're on track, you don't want to boil your brake fluid because you'll have a bad day. If the brake, think of this, the brake pads get really hot, like up to 1,000 degrees or so, then your brake fluid's getting really hot. And if you don't have high temperature brake fluid, like I say, you're going to have a bad day. We switched over to brake fluid we're using now is Bear, and they've actually got the highest dry boiling point. So that's why we're using that. It's great fluid at a great price. And also, if you're on track a lot, you need to have brake ducts. You need to get air to those brakes to keep them cool. If they get hotter, they get, the faster they're going to wear, because there's 3 things about brake pads: heat, friction, and wear. And all those kind of combine. If for like a street pad, the heat goes up, the friction goes down, and the wear increases dramatically. For a race pad, the heat goes up, friction goes up, and if you get out of the range of that pad, then the wear goes up. So it's always important to get your brake pad, your brake fluid, and brake ducts if you're on a track car. For even for autocross, I would put good brake fluid in there. I mean, you just never know when you have to do a fast panic stop and the spike the temperatures on both the rotor, the caliper, and the brake fluid. So that's my little thing on brake fluid. Okay, good time to take a cup of coffee. Which reminds me, if you're just joining us, I'm Kenny Brown. This is Cars and Coffee, and I'm sharing some of my extensive knowledge and experience of 40 years of professional motorsports and building some great street car, track cars, and championship-winning race cars. And we talked about Dan Gurney is on this side. And for those that have been with you before, you know all about my trusty toolbox back here. That toolbox has been with me for over 40 years, and it has been to just about every major racetrack in North America, and even up to Canada twice, where we won the GT class of the 24 Hours of Canada 2 years in a row. So if Brad one time said, "Boy, if that toolbox could talk," and yeah, if that toolbox can talk, it's seen a lot. So we're moving on to Brian, and Brian, I'm sorry, I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name. I just don't want to embarrass myself. So Let's see. His question is for S197. What is the purpose of the tubular rear control arms and relocation brackets of the rear axle? Also, NVH concerns. Also, what should I expect my coolant temperature to be on track? Currently, I have a Boss 302R radiator, and it still gets the cylinder head is getting at 240 degrees after about 10 minutes on the track. Well, the big question is, what is the water temperature doing? Keeping cars cool is really important, and we've had a lot of customers call, and their cars are running hot on track. And there's a couple of solutions. A vented hood. If you don't have a vented hood does a lot of good things. First of all, it gets the heat out the engine heat out from under the hood, and that does two things: it evacuates heat, and also, if you have a solid hood, when the air comes through the radiator, the only place for it to go is down. And when you get all that extra air going down, what's happening is you're building up positive pressure under the front of the car. And that's not what you want. More positive pressure has less grip you're going to have. So by venting that heat at the top, you're also reducing the pressure underneath the front of the car, which is good for improving your cornering. Example, back when Ford Racing was doing initial development on the Boss 302S, they were at Groton, which is a track in Michigan. And my late son, Paul, brought his hood, which is a really great design, has a lot of vents in it. And they put that, only change they made was they put that hood on the car and dropped the water temperature, and I can't remember exact number, but they picked up like over a second in lap time. So a vented hood is one good thing. If you don't want to go to the expense of the vented hood, we've got just a fabulous radiator. It's our triple. It's triple thick and triple pass. What I mean by that is it's really thick, and we use a smaller tube so that we get more tubes and more surface area, and it's like really thick. But the other thing, it's triple pass. Now, a standard radiator is single pass. It'll come in on the passenger side, kind of float through, and then go out on the driver's side at the bottom. Well, that can cause just spots in the lower right and the upper left corners, which don't get as much cooling capability because water is going to take the easiest path. So in stock car racing, the twin pass radiator has been really popular for years. That's where the water comes in one side, makes a U-turn, and goes out the other side. Well, that's good for GM cars because I guess both engine water's on the same side, but for a Mustang that won't work. So we come up with a triple pass where it comes in the top, goes across, makes a U-turn, goes back across, makes another U-turn, goes back across again. So we get almost total saturation of the water going through, and with the extra fins and the extra thickness, it cools like a dream. We had one customer that was having heating issues at Road America with his Shelby GT350. And by putting the triple radiator in, he dropped his water temperature like close to 30 degrees. So that's a good way to bring your temperature down is with a good radiator. And also, if you get a good vented hood, that'll help too. And if you get a vented hood, make sure the vents are closer to the radiator than the windshield. Because if it's closer to the radiator, you've got fast moving air at that point, which is negative pressure, which will help suck the air out from under the engine. If you got it all the way back, like near the cowl, that's high pressure air. And you're not going to draw as much out because the pressure at the base of the windshield is high pressure. And that's why a lot of stock cars, they actually pick up air for the carburetor at the base of the windshield because that's a high pressure area. So there's a couple tips on cooling. Now let's get back to the purpose of the tubular control arms and the relocation brackets. Okay, the control arms and relocation brackets are components of a solution. And if people have been with me for a while know that, what I really focus on is creating solutions for Mustangs. And the thing about S197s is they get tail happy, especially the Coyote cars and the GT350s. It doesn't take very much to get the back loose. So what my solution is what we call a rear grip kit. And the tubular control arms and the axle brackets are all part of that. And I'll start with the control arms and axle brackets and work backwards so you can see how everything works together. We went to tubular control arms, aluminum control arms, because they're light. They're really light. And also, everybody uses like 3/4 inch rod ends and big tubes. We dropped down to a super high grade, professional grade 5/8 rod end. They're Teflon lined. And by doing that, this is like less than half the weight of other control arms, rod end control arms in the market. That's one thing. But if you're looking, you're going to see that that's a little odd. We got different spacers on each side. Well, if you look underneath a S197 Mustang, or look at the control arms, the lower control arms are splayed outward at the front. Well, doing geometry, I spent years working on geometry for Mustangs, and looking at the geometry. If you're looking plan view down and were to draw a point to line to convergence, it's way behind the car, and if you take that point and draw it up through the roll center, then it's pointing up in the air, and that's not what we wanted to do. So by taking the control arms and at the front, we'll move the pickup point inboard, and at the back, move it outboard. So at the end, we have a control arm parallel to center line, which is what we're looking for. Because then you don't have this roll axis thing pointing up in the air. It becomes parallel to lower control arms, which we're going to talk about the connection between rear roll center and front roll center. So that's the control arm view and why we do it. Now, the axle brackets are part of improving what's called the side view geometry, side view swing arm geometry, which creates the instant center, and the instant center is what impacts anti-squat. And anti-squat is how quickly pressure gets from the car down to the tires to get forward bite. Now, our traction bracket, if you've seen other traction brackets in the market, this is completely different. First of all, there's only one hole. There's not a whole line of holes here to hook up to. Secondly, there's no great big thing that comes out the back and hooks up. I never understood that. Why would you have something that would move anyway? What we do is I just put it in shear, so there's no way this is going to rotate. And then for the guys that are running high horsepower that want extra control, then we have a hole in here. You can put another bolt in, so it's solid on both sides. It'll never move. But I have only one hole because I've worked out the geometry I like the best for the side view, which means anti-squat. And because I don't like people having to adjust things at the track. If you have things to adjust, you're going to be adjusting rather than focusing on your driving. Driving is the most important thing. So I picked the point I like, and that relates to the upper control arm module. I say module because our upper control arm comes with the bracket for the car, because two things. First of all, it's longer than factory. It has we do use a 3/4 rod end at the top because that's a single control arm with a lot of torque goes through it. But it's longer, and the pickup point is changed to impact the side view geometry, which is looking at the car from the side. You take the lower control arm and the upper control arm, and where they meet is the instant center. And how that matches up to 100% anti-squat depends on how much grip you have, how much traction you have going forward. So that's why it was only one hole in the axle bracket. It's different from everybody else. Plus, it mounts. So there's no way that's going to move. The other ones with the little bar that comes up. Plus, it's a whole bunch lighter. Little side note on axle brackets. The first axle bracket that appeared on a Mustang, we introduced in, I don't remember the year, maybe 89 on the Fox cars. And since then, it's like everybody's brother has come out with axle brackets. So, we pioneered the jacking rails. We pioneered the axle brackets. I mean, there's so many things that we pioneered that people have copied. So that's, so I talked about the control arms, why I do the control arms, and why the axle brackets only have one hole. And the upper control arm module is the pickup points mixed and are changed. Also, we have a little bend in the upper control arm. I should have had one ready, but this question came in late. And we have a little bend in ours simply because if you have a lowered Mustang and if you got a straight upper control arm, it's going to bang on the body, on the floor pan. So that's the whole part of it. Now the third part, that's maybe more the fourth part of the rear grip kit is the panner bar. And the panner bar is really, really important because what we do. Where the panner bar crosses the center line of a Mustang is the roll center. And in a Mustang, you look underneath an S197, that's right in the middle of the differential. Well, by having the roll center up that high, going around a corner, you can feel the car kind of tip up, and like going around a right-hand corner, the inside tire is going to feel like it's getting light, and also the left front tire is going to be digging in. Well, that's because the roll center is high in the back. And what I do is I move the roll center down. To give you some history, in late 90s, Trans Am racing, Watts link is the best way to locate an axle. Unfortunately, wherever the pin is, that's the roll center. And on the back of a Mustang, you can't get it down very low. And plus, you have to add a whole bunch of, things just to make it work. Well, the Trans Am cars, they have like an underslung frame. So it was real easy. We could take a Watts link and mount it horizontal at the bottom of the differential and just tie it over the frame. That was easy to do. But doing that for, the average guy's garage is pretty difficult. So I follow the same principle. We have a roll center rear location kit, where we take the panner bar and move it all the way down to the bottom of the differential, which brings the rear roll center down, and the front roll center, we'll talk to you if I get time, we bring that up. So that's kind of like the rear grip kit. Really cool control arms, axle brackets with no adjustment. So all you have to do is focus on driving. The upper module is longer, pickup points moved, and then we bring the roll center down. So the car, just what that does to the back of the car. If you go into the Speed Therapy Society, the comments of some of the people that put that on their car, it's pretty interesting. If you haven't joined the Speed Therapy Society, please do. Like I say, this is where all the questions come from. So we got through your cooling, and we got through axle brackets. And so now, look, I want one more question, and we'll start talking about front grip. Jim wants to know, he's got 2019 with a Performance Pack 2 MagneRide. He just added the Ford 5300W MagneRide lowering springs. And he's got noise, lots of noise from the back suspension. Any thoughts what might be wrong? Okay, that's kind of a tough question. It's like calling your doctor and saying, hey, I have a pain in my back. Can you fix it? Let me take some coffee. So, there's a lot of noise. It could be a rattle, it can be a clunk. It can be, a bang. My suggestion is you have to kind of go on a detective mission, and you have to think logically. You have to go back and look at every single bolt or nut that you disturbed or took off or put back on in the process of putting the rear springs in. You need to look at everything and see if anything just happens to be loose. Also on the springs, if they had like the insulators top and bottom on the factory springs, and you didn't put them back, you can get some noise from the springs. Also, look around if it's a rubbing noise or a banging noise or a clunking noise. Look around and see if you can see anything that's close to something else. And if something's close to something else, are the witness marks of where it might be rubbing. So going on and finding a noise is that's kind of like the scourge of repairing cars is trying to track down noises because noises travel. You might think it's here, but it's actually there. So go through all the nuts and bolts that you disturbed during the process putting your springs in. Check and see if it had isolators on top, isolators on the bottom, and you didn't put them back in. That could create a noise. And look and see if anything is close that could be moving up against something. That's the best I can tell you. Is you got to be a detective and just start thinking logically and trying to figure out. If you can kind of define what the noise is to yourself, that could help quite a bit. So anyway, that's the best I can do for you. If you have more questions, you can always call Carrie and set up a 15-minute consult with me, and we can talk it through. So, okay, those were the questions. And I like the questions this week, and these are great questions. Be sure to send your questions into Speed Therapy Society, or you can send some questions in. I'll try to get to them and answer them later. So now we're going to move on to rear grip. I'm going to move this over so I don't knock it over on my foot. Okay, we're talking about front grip and how to make the car turn on a dime. Well, that's pretty simple. You have to improve the geometry. Mustangs as they come from the factory, they're a great car. They're a great high performance street car. They do a lot of things really well, but what they don't do is, if you really push them, you really take them to the limit. They weren't designed to be hard on track cars. Yes, they kind of say they were, but you get right down to it, and there's a lot of things that need to be improved to be a really hot track car. And so I talked about the rear grip kit in the back and how we changed the anti-squat with the from the instant center upper control arm and the brackets, and then the lower control arm, and then brought the rear roll center down. Okay, well, the other part of making the Mustang work is bring the rear roll center down and bring the front roll center up. We have our front grip kit only consists of 3 basic components: the K-member, control arms, and bump steer tie rod ends. That's it. And the K-member and the control arms are actually engineered to work as a unit because that we get geometry in the control arm, we get geometry in the K-member to make it all work. So what do I do with that? Well, what we do, first thing we do is we move the ball joint forward to get more caster. And if people have been with me before know I love caster Mustangs. If you got a Mustang alignment shop, put every bit of caster in it'll take, and it doesn't matter if it's not balanced side to side, get all the caster in it'll take. It does a lot of things. It helps. First of all, it helps camber. It helps high-speed stability, number one. It helps the camber gain. It also helps, believe it or not, it helps the anti-dive in the front, which anti-dive then helps in braking. It also helps in turn-in. So we do that. What I'm saying, and what we do is we spent a lot engineering and building these control arms, and these are heavy-duty, really heavy-duty, designed for the track. And this is how we bring the front roll center up with an extended ball joint. Now, for the 5 to 10 cars, we don't build the control arms for 5 to 10 cars anymore. And the reason is this is a 19 millimeter shaft on this ball joint, and the 5 to 10 cars had 18 millimeter shaft. And when we extend the shaft, I just don't like using the 18. So what we do is we ask anybody with a 5 to 10 that wants to put our front grip kit on is to source some used spindles from 11 to 14. You can get them from junkyards, salvage, repurposing yards, pretty reasonable. And that way you've got a really, really strong pin in the front. So, through changing all the geometry at the front, we changed the camber gain, the caster gain, the roll center, and the anti-dive. That just makes the cars turn. We had, I think a couple of weeks ago, Wendy, who watches us and also put the whole front and rear grip kit on our car, on a race car. Her comment was, it feels like the car pivots, okay? Turns fast. Now, we all know that the strength of the Mustang is, boom, straight line. They're a drag race car. Straight line speed is the strength of Mustang. On track, where they kind of fall short is braking and turning. Well, between the front rear grip kit and front grip kit, I solve all that. It's a total solution by adding anti-squat to the back. Anti-squat also is anti-lift. So under braking, if you got a Mustang and you brake really hard, you kind of feel the back go up. Why, by putting anti-squat in, it also is anti-lift, so the back doesn't want to come up. And then we put anti-dive in the front, so it doesn't want to like nosedive on you. Those two things, plus the front roll center up, the rear roll center down, just change the car completely. Because what I engineered the suspension around is the strength of the Mustang and the weakness of the Mustang. The strength, straight line. So with the anti-squat and anti-dive, you can brake really, really late. In racing, that's the best opportunity to overtake somebody who's under braking. In track days, you can use your braking capability to like intimidate somebody in front of you so they'll get out of your way. But by braking, being able to brake late and hard, you actually maybe you'll extend the straightaway by 2, 3, 4, even 5 car lengths, depending on the track, which means you made the straightaway longer, which is the Mustang strength. Between the geometry in the front makes the car turn. And by bringing the front roll center up, the rear roll center down in the turn, you don't have to wait as long for the axle to settle. So you get back to the gas sooner. So you get you're accelerating through the apex, which means you're flat on the gas on corner exit. That means you just made the corner shorter by the quick rotation, and getting the sooner, you made the next straightaway longer. So I make the straightaways longer and the cornering shorter. I mean, it's just, if you've ever driven, anybody's ever driven one of my cars will tell you, it's just pretty amazing. And it's geometry. Like I say, the S197s, that's AGS 4.0. That's the fourth generation of geometry. AGS 1.0 started with the 87 Saleen Mustangs, championship Mustangs, that I engineered. And with every model change, with its improvement and a progression. Before the S197, the SN95, we introduced AGS 3.0 and 3.5 in 2001 at SEMA. And at 3.0 was the front K-member assembly, which again had geometry changes, number of geometry changes. And the interesting, it's really hard to hold up a K-member, but I can hold up like a control arm for the SN95, and the ball joints just came in yesterday, so I haven't got them pressed in yet. You can see this is a pretty stout control arm, and it's a lot different than what you see. Most aftermarket control arms for Fox SN95 is just like two straight tubes, and maybe they'll have cross tube back here. Well, and most of them look pretty spindly. This is engineered. This is done with FEA, and you know I talk about triangles. This actually forms three triangles. You've got one triangle in the front, and between the car and here you have another triangle in the back. So double triangulation makes it super strong. And then again, the ball joint is extended. We were the first people to use extended ball joints back in 2001, actually. Now everybody's doing it. And the problem was the only ones we could get for extended ball joints back then were for ASA cars, which were GM, which means we had to like do some funky things to get it into spindle. But we were the first to do the long shank ball joints, which brings the roll center up. I think I got through all that. And also in the SN95, our camber plates, we call it Caster Plus, because I took the caster adjustment out. And what I found is every time we put a set of camber plates on, we'd always have maximum caster. And I thought, that's kind of why will we need all this extra stuff? So by eliminating the caster adjustment, we're able to get like another half-degree caster. And so the caster's fixed on the Caster Plus and the SN95s and Fox cars. And like I say, caster is everything. So I've kind of gone through, I think, something I forgot. Anytime you've got urethane bushings like that, the grease, the terrible grease is really important. You need to get grease on the inside and on the pin. That's super important. And then just a really, really light coating on the face. Because if you don't, they're going to squeak. Plain and simple. And this grease, if you've ever used it before, is really good, but it's sticky and it gets on your hands. It's almost impossible to get off. Two solutions. One, somebody told me the WD-40 takes it off, which sounds like a good solution. Or just wear some vinyl gloves. Gloves are kind of like the big thing now, so they're easy to find. And that way, you don't have to get the super sticky stuff on your fingers. So, see, I've got through. Got to go back to my list. Okay. Bridget is taking Carrie's place with a note. Remember to like Cars and Coffee this episode by clicking the like button and top of the live session. Like button and thumbs up. And the other thing that if you haven't been with us for a while, that Facebook kind of had a problem, and we were supposed to have thumbs that go up and wrenches to go up. But somehow they got hot and they kind of melted and they sort of look like a heart. But just ignore that. Just imagine that's a wrench. So, we like getting wrenches and thumbs up. It helps spread the word. Again, please, if you've got friends or a group that you think could get some value out of what I talk about, please share this with them. Have them join us. We'd love to have you. And then, like I say, the Speed Therapy Society is the place to be. I mean, it's getting cool. The other thing that we're doing is we have the Speed Therapy Academy going. And this week in the Academy, we talked about, what did we talk? Tires and wheels. And as a special guest on the master class, we had Steve Shard from Forge Line Wheels. He gave a real nice presentation. I mean, we've covered geometry, chassis, suspension. I think next week we're doing cooling and hardware. So it's the Academy's turned out to be pretty good. Everybody seems to be learning a lot. I'm looking over here, parts I set out. The third component to the front grip kit on S197 Mustang is the bump steer tie rod ends. Now, when you lower a Mustang, your bump steer kind of gets off, and this is a standard tie rod end, and this is our tie rod end. You can see that the shaft is longer, which moves the ball of the tie rod end down. I tell you, if you're looking for, how to get your bump steer, if your bump steer is right, if your bump steer is wrong, the quick, down and dirty, easy way is just stand back and look at the control arm angle and the tie rod angle. If they are parallel, your bump steer is going to be pretty close. If they're not parallel, then you need to look at ways to fix it. That's why we use this. We kind of bring the arm, the steering arm down, so it's mostly parallel with the control arm, which improves bump steer. And bump steer is going around a corner. If you got the wheel turned and you hit a bump, there's a toe change, and that toe change could make the car do funky things. So I think if we've got any questions coming in, Bridget? No questions. It was an easy day for me. If you've got questions, send them in. Because I think I made it all the way through in record time. Let's make sure I didn't miss anything. Facebook, like button, share. We talked about Greg's jacking rails, Ray's brake pads, Brian's cooling and control arms and traction and axle brackets, and Jim with his MagneRide. So I covered all that.
Talk a little bit about the Academy class.
The Academy is, for those that don't know, from what came out of the Speed Therapy Society is people just want to learn more and more and more what's kind of locked up in my head. So I did a supposed to be 5, turned into a 6-day workshop in the evenings, transforming your driving experience, which went extremely well. People loved it, and they liked it so much. People want to learn even more. So what we did, we formed the Speed Therapy Academy, which is a 12-week course where I take the subjects I talked about, like during the week of Cars and Coffee, and we take a much deeper dive. I mean, we spend a whole session just on wheels and tires, a whole thing on geometry, whole thing on shocks. So it gets a really deeper dive, and I share a lot of good information. That's a paid course that goes 12 weeks. And Carrie wants me to do another one in the fall, and she's trying to talk me into it because it's a lot of work for me. But if there's enough interest, we may look at doing another academy in the fall.
Brad said he missed the comment on the front spindles on the S197.
Okay, copy. Brad missed the comment on spindles and S197. Okay, we don't offer lower control arms, front lower control arms for the 5 to 10 Mustangs anymore. The reason for that is the ball joint is 18 millimeters, and we extend the ball joint to bring the roll center up. And in 2011, for the 11 to 14 cars, Ford went to a 19-inch shaft on the ball joint, which is stronger. If Ford went to it for the regular street cars, we certainly should go to it for the earlier cars because it's got a longer shaft, and longer shaft, there's more things to go wrong. So for the 5 to 10s, if you want to put the front grip kit on, you need to go out and look for from salvage yards or online S197 spindles, or you can call and have Rich try to help you find some. But that's the whole thing on the spindles. We just don't make the 5 to 10s anymore because it's a smaller ball joint shaft, and we're putting a lot of load. I mean, the G's that we create with this suspension are pretty high. So we want to be sure that nobody has an issue, because we have seen in the earlier days of when the extended ball joints first came out, like 5 and 6. We have seen some break. They've gotten the metallurgy has gotten significantly better since then. But even so, we just stick with the 19-inch ball joints. It's just the better solution.
Ray Earls is asking rear camber arms for the S550.
Ray is asking about rear camber arms for the S550. Yes, you need them. We actually have upper camber arms on our website that are really, really nice piece. Super well made. They're forged aluminum, and they're really cool. If I'd have known, I'd have had one up here. Maybe I'll. Oh no, we don't. We just put one on Kelly's car. What's cool about them is they're symmetrical, and what you can do, you can actually adjust camber on both ends. And what they recommend is you can do a base camber on the inside, and then there's an adjustable camber on the outside. I mean, it's just a really, really great piece, because anybody that's tried to adjust rear camber on an S550, you start pulling your hair out. We've had guys like alignment guys go crazy because they can't just adjust it, and it just can't get right. So this is a perfect solution, and they're on the website. I don't know if Brad's there, if he can find a link to them or not. Yes, I mean it's great. I mean, if you're, you need them. It's plain and simple. It's one of those things you need.
Brian, and I apologize, I cannot exactly pronounce his last name. It says, do you need anything special for the extended ball joint and tie rod other than the K member and control arm? Just bolts up to the OE parts.
I mean the control arm bolts to the K member. The K member just bolts right up. It's a direct replacement. I mean the tie rods and ball joints that's all part of the front grip kit. All three come together, and like I say, it's making a Mustang handle is all about geometry. And I think I'm the only one in the industry that has put this much effort. I mean, I've been studying Mustang geometry since 1987. And with each new model, I've taken my AGS, which stands for Advanced Geometry Suspension Systems, because my suspensions are systems; they aren't parts. They're systems that create a solution. The big jump was in 01 when we went to 3.0 and 3.5, which is actually the IRS rear geometry. We're the only people that really support 99 to 04 IRS cars. I mean, we really support them because we know them. We've been doing that since '99, but that was the 3.0. And when the new S197 came out, I was in heaven. I mean, from a geometry standpoint, everything I needed to make it better was on that car. First of all, it had 3-link rear suspension with a panel bar. I mean, that just made geometry so easy. And then at the front, which made it easy, is the front control arms were no longer splayed; they were parallel to center line. So again, that just made my life so much better, and I was so excited. And because I worked and the geometry I've come up with for 197s, I'll put it up against anybody in the market, and it's probably one of the most cost effective. It just works, and anything that works and works good is worth the investment.
Dave Robinson, he entered late and would like to know the story on the artwork.
Okay. The artwork this month is actually Dan Gurney at the 1967 Grand Prix of Belgium, when he was that is the only American driver in an American car to ever win a Formula One race. And he was driving a All-American Eagle with a Westlake V12. And my Formula One history is, I should have studied up on it. I think they had issues with the Westlake engine, and it just barely made it to the end. But nevertheless, he won, which was a big deal. And this is one of my pieces of artwork, and people who have been with us know that every month I put a different piece of my artwork, automotive artwork collection up to share with you. So Dan Gurney and Eagle at Spa. I should have put it up a couple of weeks ago because Formula One was at Spa, which if it came in late, I mean, that is one track on my bucket list. If I could only drive one cool track in the world, it would be Spa. I mean, that track I don't know. There's something about it.
Brian West asked, don't you also need spindles for the 05 to 10?
Yeah, that's what I talked about. 5 to 10 Mustangs need the spindles because of the ball joint. So we only do the 11 to 14 control arms with 11 to 14 ball joints because it's 19 millimeters versus 18 millimeters.
That's it right now. Maybe talk about subscribing to the newsletter for reminders.
Oh, yeah. Bridget's doing a pretty good job of being Carrie this week. Reminder of the newsletters. Sign up for the newsletters. There's a lot of information that goes out. There's information in the Speech Therapy Society and also newsletters. If you want to kind of stay in touch with what's going on, sign up for newsletters.
We have a question from Stephen Bacad. It says, off topic, do you have suspension characteristic recommendations for short chassis, low weight vehicles like small block Shelby, Cobra, 2,400 to 2,500 pounds?
Okay, start from the beginning again.
Off topic, do you have suspension characteristic recommendations for short chassis, low weight vehicles like small block Shelby, Cobra, 2,400 to 2,500 pounds?
Okay, he's asking about the recommendations, suspension recommendations for like a Cobra. I mean, it's a very broad question. The thing is, if the ones that I've looked at, I haven't looked at all of them, but the ones that I've looked at, the geometry is not what I call ideal. If there's a way to change the geometry, and that's really hard. I mean, if I had a car to measure, I could figure out what the geometry is and what changes to make. But as far as other things, I mean, putting a set of at least good shock absorbers and springs. I'm off the top of my head, I'm guessing you'd be running, if it's a live axle, maybe for that weight car, at least a 400 to 600 pound spring in the front, depending on if it's a street car or track car, and then about if it's a 400, maybe 275 at the back. If it's a 600, maybe a 375 or 400 spring in the back with single adjustable shocks or double adjustables. But a good shock package and the right springs make a big difference on how cars work. But aside from that, I mean, I'd have to have more information. If it's something that you want to look into deeper, again, you can call Carrie and set up a 15-minute consult, and we can kind of talk through that. But yeah, I've always wanted to get my hands on one of those cars, really, really put a real suspension under them. I mean, like one of my suspensions, because I've got just for a double wishbone, I've got an amazing geometry package that we probably come to market next year. The story behind that is in 2000. I'm guessing this is like 2003. We were partnering with Ford Racing on a double wishbone SLA suspension that would bolt in the S197 chassis. And we got about halfway through it, and Dan Davis lost a bunch of budget. So he was trimming out projects and reassigning engineers. And one of the projects he had to take Jay, who was helping out, the engineer helping us, and reassign him. So he just said, "Here, you take it and finish it." So eureka! All of a sudden, instead of being a quasi performance OE front suspension, it was going to be pure performance suspension. So I got a hold of a friend of mine, Buddy Fay, who's engineered, God, how many different cars. He's won Trans Am championships. He's engineered NASCAR, sports cars, prototypes. He's engineered just about everything. Really smart guy. Anyway, got together with him, and we decided that the best handling live axle cars were the Trans Am cars in the late 90s. And all out of the 5 Trans Am cars back then, the 2 best were the Pratt & Miller and the Riley J chassis. So essentially, we came up with a geometry based on a Trans Am race car in a package that bolts into an S197. And like I say, I had to put that on the shelf in 2004, 2005 when I was having health issues, and we're going to bring that back. It's the next product on my development list. We've got something that I've got to bring to market first that we'll be talking about in future weeks. I can't talk about it now, but the next thing is going to be that front suspension. That's going to go to probably next spring, I would guess. And then also I designed a narrow track version for a friend of mine who was racing SN95 in NASA. And we tried the bolt. This is when I was still sick. This is like 2010, maybe 2009. We tried to bolt the S1, because it had some prototype, the S197 SLA, it would not fit on. So what I did is I was a friend of mine's shop who actually was a fabricator for Riley and Scott, the race car company. And I sat there and recalculated all the suspension. And in essence, I drew the suspension on the concrete floor with Sharpie. And next to each point, I put the elevation. And, Greg built that, and it worked amazingly well. It's like the best suspension you ever had. We actually have a second set of parts from Steve's car. And at some point, we're going to also do a double wishbone for the SN95. But I also like to do a new rear suspension for SN95. We were talking like late next year for all this stuff. But I got some cool stuff coming that nobody else is going to be able to match. Okay. Here we go. This is Carrie with long hair. Okay. She's doing a good job of being Carrie, I got to tell you. And if you like what we're saying, please share. I like people to know, but at least this is all my opinion from my experience, which is pretty extensive. And over the years, I've made a lot of mistakes. And by making a lot of mistakes, I can share with you what mistakes not to make, because mistakes cost money. They cost time and money. So, please share with your friends.
We're also on Instagram now.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. We're also on Instagram.
Yes, so follow us there.
Yeah, you can follow us on Instagram. I forgot about that.
Content there from what's on Facebook. So.
Okay, different content on Instagram than what's on Facebook.
Yeah. Maybe remind them that you're going to be talking about the JLT cold air kit.
Okay, and next week we'll talk about the cold air kit for S550. And again, send in your questions to the Speed Therapy Society, because that's how I kind of shape the content I want to talk about, because I talk about what you want to learn about. To me, that makes the most sense. And every week we got different questions, and sometimes we get the same questions again, which is no problem. I just give you the same answers again. So if we have no more questions today, we're going to wrap this up early today, which is kind of good for a change. Plus, it's going to be wrap up at 11, which is an hour earlier than usual, so everybody can get out and enjoy the day and have a good time.
Saturday at 10 a.m.
And remember, from now on, it's 10 a.m. Saturday mornings, Cars and Coffee. So this is Kenny Brown. I'm glad you had a chance to join me this morning and join the rest of us, who the Speed Therapy Society people are always here. And join the Speed Therapy Society. I got to get this stuff in. Carol, kill me if I don't. Join the Speed Therapy Society. Get a newsletter. Click the little like buttons and share. Okay, I got that in. Even though Carrie isn't here, her spirit continues to influence what I say. So with that, we will see you guys next Saturday. The Speed Academy guys. Well, I'll see you Tuesday night. And so have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week.